D-Day, June 6, 1944, the greatest amphibious invasion in human history. Thousands of ships cross the English Channel. Thousands of planes roar in the sky. Tens of thousands of soldiers prepare to set foot on the enemy shores of Normandy, on beaches that would go down in history as Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword. This day was meant to be the beginning of the end for the Third Reich, but it could just as easily have become the greatest catastrophe in the Allies' military history. The German High Command was expecting an invasion. They had turned the coast of France into an impregnable fortress, the infamous Atlantic Wall, a labyrinth of concrete bunkers, minefields, anti-tank obstacles, and machine gun nests, ready to turn the coastal waters into a bloodbath. How could this defense be breached? How could these deadly obstacles be overcome under withering fire? Standard tanks would be helpless. They would get bogged down in the sand, blown up by mines, or picked off before they even reached the shore. They didn't just need a tank, they needed a miracle. And that miracle was born in the secret workshops of Britain. These weren't just tanks. They were true monsters, mechanical mutants straight from the pages of a science fiction novel. Tanks that could swim, tanks with giant flails that carved paths through minefields. Flamethrower tanks that turned bunkers into blazing furnaces. Bridge-laying tanks that threw bridges across anti-tank ditches. They were called Hobart's Funnies. This was a secret army of mechanical monstrosities created by one eccentric but brilliant general whom the traditional military establishment considered a madman. This is the story of how a few dozen of the strangest combat vehicles ever created ensured the success of the most important operation of World War II and saved thousands of lives. Before we get to the main story, we'd like to ask for a little support. A like and a subscription would be the best way to thank us. Thank you. Get ready, we're heading to the beaches of Normandy to meet the most unusual tank unit in history, the 79th Armored Division, and its incredible Hobart-esque circus. To understand where these mechanical oddities came from, we have to go back to 1942 and the tragic Dieppe raid. This trial landing by Canadian and British forces on the French coast ended in a crushing disaster. The conventional tanks that were landed on the beach proved utterly useless. They couldn't overcome the shingle beach and concrete barriers and were picked off by German artillery like targets in a shooting gallery. The losses were horrific. The lesson of Dieppe was brutal, but clear. A successful invasion of Europe required not just tanks, but specialized engineering vehicles capable of tackling specific tasks to mining, destroying fortifications, and overcoming obstacles. And the man tasked with creating these weapons was Major General Percy Hobart. Hobart was an extraordinary character, a brilliant theorist of tank warfare and a pioneer in the use of armored vehicles. He was known for his abrasive personality, unconventional thinking, and utter contempt for military bureaucracy. For his bold but inconvenient ideas, he had been effectively forced out of the army in 1940, and by the start of the war, he was serving as a lance corporal in the local Home Guard. But Winston Churchill, who had a soft spot for talented mavericks, personally brought Hobart back into service and gave him carte blanche. He was tasked with leading the new 79th Armored Division and turning it into an experimental laboratory for creating and testing the most outlandish ideas. Hobart took to the task with enthusiasm. His division quickly earned the nickname the Zoo or Hobart-esque Circus because the machines being developed there were unlike anything seen before. Hobart and his engineers took standard British and American tanks, the Churchill and the Sherman, and transformed them into highly specialized machines. Each vehicle was an answer to a specific threat posed by the Atlantic Wall. The first and perhaps most critical problem was getting ashore. How do you get tanks onto a beach under fire if the landing craft can't get right up to the water's edge? The solution was the Sherman DD, or duplex drive, amphibious tank. The DD stood for its dual propulsion system. The engineers devised an ingenious solution. A waterproof canvas screen was fitted around the hull of a standard Sherman tank. It could be raised using inflatable rubber tubes, turning the 30-ton combat vehicle into a sort of clumsy boat. A special transmission allowed the track's two power to propellers at the rear. The idea was to launch these tanks from landing craft several kilometers from the shore. They were to swim to the beach under their own power, drop their screens, and be the first to unleash their firepower on the German fortifications, providing cover for the infantry. For the crews, it was a true nightmare. They were inside a steel box, floating in the middle of churning waves, navigating almost blind, relying on a compass, and seeing only the tops of other tanks' turrets. Any damage to the canvas screen meant certain death. On D-Day, these swimming tanks were to be the vanguard of the invasion. But that was just the beginning. What about the millions of mines the Germans had sown across the beaches and their approaches? For this task, Hobart created one of the most intimidating-looking machines, the Sherman Crab. A giant rotating drum fitted with dozens of heavy steel chains was mounted on the front of a Sherman tank. As the tank moved forward, this flail spun at high speed, and the chains thrashed the ground in front of it, detonating any mines in its path. The sight was hellish. The crab, advancing, kicked up clouds of dust and earth, while the roar of exploding mines and the engine scream merged into a deafening cacophony. It literally chewed safe paths through the minefields for infantry and other vehicles to follow. It wasn't just a minesweeper, it remained a fully functional tank and could fire its main gun to suppress enemy resistance. But mines weren't the only problem. The Atlantic Wall was riddled with concrete walls, anti-tank ditches, and pillboxes that had to be destroyed or overcome. And for each of these tasks, Hobart had a beast. To destroy bunkers and pillboxes, the Churchill Crocodile was created. This was a standard heavy Churchill tank, but in place of its whole machine gun, it had a powerful flamethrower. It towed its fuel in a special armored trailer. The Crocodile could shoot a jet of blazing liquid over 100 meters, incinerating anyone inside the fortifications. The mere sight of this machine spewing torrents of fire had a terrifying, demoralizing effect on German soldiers. Many garrisons surrendered at the first sight of an approaching crocodile. To cross ditches and escarpments, the Churchill-Havre armored vehicle Royal Engineers Brigadier was developed. This tank had a platform instead of a turret, on which it carried a 30-foot, nearly 10-meter assault bridge. Upon reaching an obstacle, the tank could deploy this bridge in minutes, creating a crossing for other vehicles. And what about the soft sand or marshy ground where even tracked vehicles got stuck? Hobart had an answer for that too. The Churchill bobbin unrolled a wide canvas carpet reinforced with steel tubes in front of it, creating a temporary roadway on the move. Another variant, the Churchill fascine, carried a giant bundle of logs in front, which it would drop into a ditch or trench to fill it and allow other tanks to pass. But perhaps the most destructive of the Funnies was the Churchill-Havre with its 290mm spigot mortar, nicknamed the Flying Dustbin. This mortar didn't fire conventional shells, but 18-kilogram, 40-pound explosive charges capable of reducing a concrete pillbox to a pile of rubble with a single hit. Its accuracy was low, but its destructive power was colossal. This entire collection of mechanical monsters was ready for battle. Dozens of crews had undergone grueling training, learning to operate these strange and often dangerous machines. The fate of the invasion now largely depended on whether Hobart's Funnies could do their job on the blood-soaked beaches of Normandy. In the early morning hours of June 6, 1944, Hobart's circus went into battle. The results of its deployment were both stunning and tragic, and they were dramatically different across the various landing zones. On the British and Canadian beaches Gold, Juno, and Sword Hobart's Funnies played a decisive role. The Sherman D amphibious tanks were launched in relatively calm waters and close to shore. Most of them successfully reached the beaches and provided invaluable support to the first waves of the assault. Their sudden appearance from the water, followed by withering fire, broke the German resistance at many key points. Right behind them, the crabs went to work. With a roar and a crash, they began clearing paths through the minefields, opening the way for the infantry. They were followed by the heavy WWII, demolishing concrete fortifications with their flying dust bins, and the crocodiles, burning out the remaining pockets of resistance. Thanks to the coordinated efforts of these machines, casualties in the British and Canadian sectors, though heavy, were significantly lower than predicted. The beaches were captured relatively quickly, and the Allies were able to establish a foothold. But on the American sector at the infamous Omaha Beach, a true tragedy unfolded. The American command, unlike the British, had regarded Hobart's Funnies with great skepticism. They adopted only the swimming Sherman D-Dis, but rejected most of the other engineering vehicles, considering them too cumbersome and eccentric. This decision proved fatal. In the Omaha sector, the sea was rough. The Sherman D-Dis were launched too far from shore, nearly 5 kilometers out. Huge waves swamped the flimsy canvas screens. Of the 32 tanks intended for the first wave, 27 sank before ever reaching the shore, taking their crews with them. 2 more sank as they left the landing craft. Only 3 tanks miraculously made it to the beach. As a result, the American infantry landed with virtually no tank support. They found themselves face-to-face with German machine guns and artillery hidden in well-protected pillboxes on the dominating bluffs. Omaha Beach became hell on earth, a veritable slaughterhouse. The soldiers had no means to breach the minefields and wire obstacles, no heavy weapons to suppress the enemy firing positions. They were pinned down at the water's edge, suffering horrific casualties. Only through the incredible heroism of individual soldiers and sailors who managed to blow gaps in the obstacles under a hail of fire did the Americans manage to cling to a narrow strip of the beach by the end of the day. The contrast between the success on the British beaches and the catastrophe at Omaha was stark. And the primary reason for this difference was the use or non-use of Hobart's Funnies. Where they were present, the German defenses were broken. Where they were absent, the Allies paid a terrible price in blood. After D-Day, the role of the 79th Armored Division was far from over. On the contrary, its unique vehicles proved vital in the next, equally bloody phase of the war, the battle for Normandy. As the Allies pushed deeper into France, they encountered a new problem, the infamous bocage. This was a landscape of small fields separated by thick, ancient hedgerows growing on high earthen banks. For the defending Germans, it was a paradise. Each field became a death trap, a natural fortress where anti-tank guns and machine guns could be hidden. Conventional tanks were powerless. They couldn't break through these banks, and when they tried to climb over them, they exposed their vulnerable underbellies to attack. Once again, Hobart's Funnies came to the rescue. To deal with the bocage, the Americans devised their own solution, the Sherman Rhino, welding steel tusks made from German beach obstacles to the front of their tanks. The British, meanwhile, used their WWII. Their powerful flying dustbin mortar proved to be the perfect tool for simply blowing away the hedgerows, along with the Germans hiding behind them. A single shot could create a breach large enough for vehicles to pass through. Hobart's circus was at the forefront of the British advance, solving the most difficult engineering challenges. The crocodiles continued to strike terror into the garrisons of fortified cities like Caen and Brest. Their use was so effective that often the mere sight of an approaching flamethrower tank was enough to compel an enemy surrender. The Havre bridgelayers became indispensable for crossing the countless rivers and canals of northern France and Belgium. One of their most famous operations was the crossing of the Scheldt estuary in the autumn of 1944. Capturing the port of Antwerp was critical for supplying the Allied armies, but the approaches were blocked by strong German defenses and water obstacles. Hobart's engineering tanks worked around the clock, laying bridges under fire, filling ditches, and destroying pillboxes, enabling the infantry's advance. Interestingly, the 79th Armored Division was unique not only for its equipment, but also for its organizational structure. Unlike a conventional division, it never fought as a single entity. Its regiments and squadrons, equipped with different types of machines, were attached to other units to perform specific tasks. On any given day, the Crocodiles might be supporting a Canadian infantry division, while the next, the Crabs would be clearing a path for a British tank regiment. Hobart and his staff acted as a pool of specialists dispatched to the most difficult sectors of the front. General Hobart himself personally supervised the use of his machines, often appearing at the front lines to assess the situation and advise commanders. His unconventional approach and deep understanding of both engineering and tactical problems earned him immense respect among soldiers and officers, even though the high command still regarded him with suspicion. After Normandy and the battle for the ports, the final great test for Hobart as Funnies was Operation Plunder, the crossing of the Rhine in March 1945. This was the last major natural barrier on the way into the heart of Germany. The Germans had turned the eastern bank of the river into a formidable defensive line. Once again, swimming tanks led the way, but this time it wasn't just Sherman D-Dis, but also heavier LVT Buffalo amphibians, capable of carrying infantry and light artillery. They crossed the wide river under the cover of darkness and a massive artillery barrage, establishing bridgeheads on the enemy bank. As soon as the first bridgeheads were secured, the Churchill Bridgelayers went into action, beginning the construction of heavy pontoon bridges to get the main forces across the Rhine. It was a complex and perfectly coordinated operation in which engineering vehicles once again played a key role. Their contribution to the success of this final great battle on the Western Front was invaluable. After the war in Europe ended, the 79th Armored Division was disbanded. Its mission was complete. The unusual machines were either scrapped or put in museums. General Hobart himself, the man who created this unique army, retired soon after. His legacy, however, lives on to this day. The concept of specialized engineering vehicles capable of performing a wide range of tasks on the battlefield has become an integral part of the doctrine of all modern armies. Today's combat engineering vehicles, capable of clearing mines, laying bridges, and destroying fortifications, are the direct descendants of those strange but brilliant funnies that fought on the beaches of Normandy. Hobart's circus proved one simple but vital truth. Victory in war belongs not only to the side with more soldiers or more powerful guns, but also to the side that can think outside the box, that is willing to embrace bold experiments and innovation. Percy Hobart and his engineers were not afraid to challenge established dogma. They created weapons that were not just effective, but in their own way humane. Every path cleared by a crab through a minefield, every bunker destroyed by a Churchill Havre, every bridge laid across a river, was not just a step towards victory, but also dozens, even hundreds of infantry lives saved from a frontal assault. The story of Hobart's circus is not just a tale of strange tanks. It is a testament to engineering ingenuity and tactical flexibility. It is a reminder that sometimes the craziest ideas, born in the mind of a single mad general, can change the course of history and determine the outcome of the greatest war humanity has ever known. And when we remember the heroes of D-Day today, it is worth remembering not only the soldiers who stormed the beaches, but also the unsung crews who drove these clumsy but vital mechanical mutants into battle, the true, overlooked saviors of Operation Overlord. Your support, a like and a subscription, is very important to us. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can always stay up to date and never miss our new videos.